think it's time for another final exam prep video. This time it's graph theory. Yay! Luckily, my graph theory exams are, I don't want to say they're made as easy as possible, but I get a very thorough and detailed study guide with every exam. And I've mentioned this in previous videos, but I have 4 graph theory exams and the lowest grade is dropped. So if you're fine with your first 3 exam grades, then you don't have to take the final. That will serve as your drop. So this is technically my last non-final exam. But if I do well enough on it, then I won't have to do the true final, which will be comprehensive and therefore obviously a lot more difficult, a lot more stuff to memorize. So it's a matter of maybe like this many flashcards for this exam compared to the amount for the whole class, which is still lacking a few, and it's probably 50 or 60. Very definition heavy, so it's a lot to memorize. So I'm trying to avoid that at all costs. So my study guide, it involves some specific stuff, not so specific stuff, like homework questions. Any of the problems from all homeworks might appear. Well, whoop-de-doo, that doesn't help me. But anyhow, gives me all the definitions I need to know, and the pages that they appear on, planar versus non-planar, regions, K-colorings, certain algorithms, click numbers, types of matchings, M-saturated, unsaturated, augmenting paths, alternating paths, unstable pairs, stable matchings, omega of H, sigma H, and 2 colorings of edges, and all that stuff. And then it's got particular algorithms I need to know, like the greedy algorithm, Gale-Shipley proposal algorithm for stable matchings. And then I also get a list of all the possible theorems that I'll have to prove. So it's basically a chore of memorizing them. Some of them are long, some of them are short, some of them involve induction, which I kind of hate, but at least it's given to me. So it's ultimately just boiled down to a matter of memorization. But I've got like, let's see, 10, basically about 15 that are in this bank of possibilities. And then 2 he's listed out here that didn't appear in the book. But that's that. So I know what's expected of me, which is tight. So right now I'm going through and looking at each one of these theorems. The vocab is basically a non-issue because I'll have flashcards, and you know that's how I'll attack that for the most part. But right now I'm going through all the theorems, and if I have them, I'm checking to see if they're only in the notes or if they're also in the book. Most of them are in the book and in my notes because he mirrors the textbook pretty closely most of the time. And I'm looking at them to see which one is better, because he might prove the same theorem, but he might do it in a different way. And oftentimes I find that his ways are a lot more verbose and wordy than what's in the book, and I'm going for short and sweet here because he said explicitly, and I know it to be true, that as long as the proof is correct and logical, that he'll accept it regardless of what form it's in, or whether or not I use induction, etc., etc., as long as it's a proper proof. So if the one in the book is shorter, then that's going to be the one that I work to memorize. So right now I'm going through all of those. I've done about half of them or so, 5 or 6, and I'm just writing them down. I already have them in my notes. My notes aren't very organized. They're not written very well. So I'm going through and rewriting them again just to look at them. And then once I write them all again, I will go through, I'll write just the theorem separately, and I'll start working on memorizing them by just writing them on the whiteboard over here. I have to gotta erase all that topology stuff, but whatever. So I'll start working through memorizing them. If I can't get it, I'll obviously refer to my notes and fill in the blanks and make corrections and whatnot. And I'll probably do that for all of them, which will take me a while. And then I'll stop and run through the flashcards 2 or 3 times. That honestly doesn't take very long, especially once I get in the groove of it and I'm memorizing most of them. And then once I do that, I'll probably go through all of the homework and pick out 2 or 3 from each section, because this is covering quite a few sections. And I'll pick out a handful and I'll work to prove those as well. Most of those will involve the theorems that I'm already working to memorize and understand completely, so they'll go hand in hand pretty well. and I think doing both of those will help the other one. And once I go through that, which will also take me a good bit of time, I'll probably come back to the theorems, work on those, work on memorizing them, writing them on the whiteboard from memory as best I can, and going through the flashcards again, and probably just jumping back and forth between those three. At one point, I may just browse the chapters and just read them, but most of that content is theorems and their associated proofs, so I don't get a lot out of it. But I do feel like this book, this is Combinatorics and Graph Theory, 2nd edition by Harris, Hurst, and Mossinghoff. It's written in a pretty straightforward manner. I don't mind reading it. It's pretty down to earth. They make jokes sometimes, which is interesting. Most of them aren't funny, but E for effort. Just kind of like a casual approach to absorbing some of this information. And after I do that for maybe half hour to an hour, I'll come back to the theorems and the homework and the definitions. So I'm going to do this most of the day. Right now it's 11:30. I've already been at it an hour and a half now. And I'll probably take a break for lunch later, and I'll probably stop at around 10 because this exam's at 8 a.m. And I feel like if I don't know something by 9 or 10 p.m. the night before, when I have an early exam like this, I'm not going to know it. And getting sleep for me personally is far more important than an extra hour or two of cramming. I imagine a lot of people would consider this cramming, but I feel like I'm doing it at such a slow, casual pace that it doesn't really count. I'm not rushing through this information. I'm taking the time to absorb it and understand it, refer to the internet, the text, and other supplemental information if I don't understand something. But most of this stuff, I've seen. I go to class every session, so it's not unknown to me. I'm not looking at anything for the first time. I wouldn't call this cramming, but if I'm up till 10 or 11, 12 o'clock at night and I'm getting tired and struggling to even concentrate on the page, and I feel like at that point it's time to call it quits for the night. So I'll do that. I probably won't get up any early, maybe an extra 10 or 15 minutes so that I can get to class and just go through my flashcards a little bit early and maybe read through the theorems a couple times and the proofs, but I won't do a whole lot the morning of just because I feel like I'd rather focus on being calm and collected, because I'm not a great test taker and I choke up a lot on tests and I'll just totally blank on things. So adding that other level of anxiety the morning of doesn't really help me much. If anything, I feel like it just wigs me out more. So I like to get as much as I can in at a slow, casual pace like I'm doing today, and luckily I don't have anything else going on. So I think that's more or less it, and probably at some point between the break, I think I have a week or 2 weeks off between spring and the start of summer, I'll work on making my intro to graph theory and intro to topology videos, but that's kind of a whole other thing. Yeah, I think that's more or less it. So hopefully you guys found it interesting and maybe helpful, but thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.